Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church. It's good to be with you today. Here we are, starting another brand new week. And all this week, I want to share some thoughts from First Samuel. Well, actually, about Samuel in First Samuel. Because First Samuel talks a lot about the history of Israel, and I'm not going to get into all that. I'm just going to talk about the man himself and some of the important things about him. So if you would, follow along here, First Samuel, first chapter, starting with verse 9. Once after a sacrificial meal at Shiloh, Hannah got up and went to pray. Eli, the priest, was waiting at his customary place beside the entrance of the tabernacle. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. And she made this vow: O God of heaven's armies, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you, and he will be yours for his entire lifetime. Well, let's start here. Hannah wants a child. Now, that's not unusual. Lots of people, even today, want a child. And some people just aren't able to have one themselves. So there are alternatives, including adoption. Now, since I adopted 7 kids, I know you can adopt anybody and love them as if they came out of your own body. It may sound strange to some folks, but even if they don't look like you, doesn't mean they're not yours. And so Hannah is pleading and pleading for a child. Now, we don't really know why, other than in that culture, of course, if you were childless, then that was a sign that God was not, well, it was unfavorable. You weren't standing right in God's eyes, and people thought it's because you did something. We still think that today. If something goes wrong, what did you do? Must be you. You did something. And sometimes that's true, and other times it's not. So in this case, Hannah makes a vow. Now, what's a vow? Well, it's like a promise, but it's more than a promise. It's saying that everything I am, I will do to make sure I keep this, regardless of the consequences. We don't make many vows today. We do wedding vows, but hey, lots of people don't keep those. So maybe they don't even fit. Maybe we ought to kind of call them wedding promises. I don't know. That's another subject. But she makes a vow. And she says, God, if you'll give me a son, then I'll give him back to you for his entire life. Now, this tells us one thing for sure. If you're going to make a promise to God, you better be prepared to keep it. You never know how it's going to turn out. So we read here that she prayed that prayer, and then in verse 20 it says, and in due time she gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, I asked the Lord for him. Now, try to imagine this if you could. A woman who's waited and waited and waited to have a son now gets one, has promised in the meantime, if I get one, God, I'll give him back to you all his life. Now, I don't know what she thought that meant. I don't have any idea because it doesn't tell us here. But she made that promise, and then the baby was born. And then let's see what happens next. Verse 24, when the child was weaned, Hannah took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh. They brought along a 3-year-old bull for the sacrifice and a basket of flour and some wine. After sacrificing the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. Eli's the priest, remember? Sir, do you remember me? Hannah asked. I am the very woman who stood here several years ago praying to the Lord. I asked the Lord to give me this boy, and he has granted my request. So now I am giving him to the Lord, and he will belong to the Lord his whole life, and they worshiped the Lord there. Now, this is strange. It's a little hard to understand, and I'm not sure I understand it either. So if you're a little confused, well, you're in good company. Hannah prays for a child. She vows that if God gives her a child, she'll give him back to the Lord. So she gets a child. When the child's weaned, I don't know, 2 years maybe, something like that, she goes back to the tabernacle to where the priest is. She says, I prayed, I asked the Lord, I made this promise, here he is. And she gives her son, Samuel, to the priest. And she goes back home. Now, you think about it. Why would you want a son so badly that in less than a few years, you give him away? Well, she didn't really give him away. She gave him back to God that she promised. Now, the rest of this week, we're going to talk more about this. So I'll leave you a little bit in the lurch right now. But the story here is of a woman who loves God. And she makes a promise, a vow, more than a promise. And she keeps it. That's the difference between someone who is a really strong Christian and someone who a little less than really strong. Now, she could have, I suppose, just raised him in the ways of God, and that would have been sufficient, but evidently it wasn't. She could have taken the short route, if you want to say, and just did a little bit, so she kind of kept her vow, but maybe she didn't. But she didn't do that either. She went, as they say, whole hog. She made a vow, and she kept it. Now, we're going to find out this week, and you can read the whole First Samuel if you want. It's a good thing she did that, changed the course of history. But she didn't know that. All she knew was that she asked God for something, and God gave it to her, and she promised that if he did do that, then this would happen, and she kept it. Today, many people make promises to God, and God keeps his promise. He keeps his side of the bargain, and then they don't. And then they wonder why things happen. Well, where did God go? You can't play games with God. You just can't. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to beat you over the head because of it. It just means that if you are willing to put your hand in his hand, he will more than gladly take it and lead you in places you never imagined. So wherever you are in life, whatever's happened, whatever you've been through, God's right there. If you'll come to him, he'll be there. Well, thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll think about this maybe. We'll go through some more the rest of this week and see if we can't get some real nuggets about life. Thanks so much for listening. If you have a prayer concern or need, just let us know. We'll do whatever we can as fast as we can to help meet your need. Take care. I'll talk to you tomorrow.